We bought a virtual office, he can't retire until Robbie's done.
Right, right,
Robbie's done in March,
yeah.
which means when, that's when he's done, is in March. But, no, I'm like,
His house is probably more my other yard for it.
really?
And my brother-in-law. And my girlfriend's mother's business law. It's, it's my yard's another.
Yeah. That's just a little compound.
We raised the IQ that whole community by about.
No, it's,
I used to joke about.
no, he said he's hopefully planning college spring, and then, the ocean's gone.
From our,
Probably.
yeah.
Oh, they're gonna start traveling, they're gonna take that more with the longest the roads native. Yeah.
But I don't have any friends who go back grades. What's that?
Robbie was bringing, eat them. Bill's not. They have. I mean, both have, morning, dinner, lunch, breakfast, 2.5 hours later, I was,
You were the one I replied to, and I said, I'm glad for that. Just got my food done, it didn't feel a whole lot farther earlier.
What's going on? You like it?
Right there.
The entire week?
No, I figured you brought it over.
No. So I got it's there all week. Cool.
Oh,
So you're saying,
but yeah, 3 days. And the first day.
Right out the Pine City, water, down there.
No, I thought we were clean water. Well, I mean, you know the town?
Yeah, no.
I'm like, all very,
Where do you live?
I live down.
Okay. Wow.
But, couple things, I was from work.
Yeah.
All my clients, they're right on the.
Little right now, or.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot.
Yeah, and it depends on how, I mean, like, I wish it
How did you do that? Okay. Show me password, whatever. Huh? Yeah, I must have. I, went for it, had it. I didn't. We go get. Oh. Be in the morning.
Yeah, he drinks. No, I'm not gonna come in real early. 14-hour day before it's done.
Got that overtime put on?
No. Yeah, pay me the same for overtime as they pay me for teaching the class. Nothing. Okay, I'm on pause right now, Austin, or no?
No, you're recording.
I'm recording?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking. What I need to do? Okay, looking for 8 minutes apparently, huh? My clock. For those of you that are online, this will be picking up with about slide number 20, talking small quantity generators in the field of the Resource Conservation and Recover Act and hazardous waste generation and disposal. Quantity generators, or SQGs, do binary reports. They can store up to 1,000 kilograms per month and accumulate up to 6,000 kilograms per month. That means they are going to be able to store or accumulate material for up to 270 days if their disposal site's more than 200 miles away, or for about 6 months or 180 days if it's less than that. We already hit these slides, didn't we? Large quantity generators, prepare annual reports covering hazardous waste activities. Oh. The large quantity generators are able to required to have and prepare biennial reports covering all of their hazardous waste activities, including the description of their waste, description of changes in toxicity, and the volumes that they generate. In their biennial reports, all their shipping information and where they've shipped, and who they shipped with when they were DS and using EPA-approved transporters. Only facilities who have approved EPA ID numbers. Their keeping is going to include manifest, TSDF reports, annual reports. quantity generator is going to be the small generator who's generating less than 100 kilograms a month. Keeping a drum of hazardous waste is going to be about 200 kilograms a month. Excuse me. If the acute hazardous waste can generate about 1 kilogram per month of that before they become a small generator. Or up to 1,000 kilograms of hazardous waste, and they don't have to do biannual reports. I was referring to a little bit ago, as you can see here, the exempt small quantity generators, and large quantity generators have variants that apply to them. Accumulation limits and storage requirements. I'll mention to you that those specific citations there from 40 CFR, the Code of Regulations that applies to environmental regulations. All of these are regulated by US EPA. In many states have received primacy for the governance of hazardous waste, and it's just the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality regulates waste here. Condition exempt small quantity generators and large quantity generators. Whether or not required. Now, it shows that conditionally exempt small quantity generators are not required to produce manifests. TSDFs that do not require it. Most state hazardous waste are going to require you to ship to them only by manifest. Partially, I mentioned earlier, the training that we're talking about here is generally HAZWOPER, Hazardous Operations Emergency Response. Operators are required to have the full gamut of training. Basic training is required for small quantity generators, and don't necessarily have to have the training at that level. Anyway. Helpful and just get head around what the different size generators are going to be required to do. Simulation, we talked about a little bit ago. It allows the generator to accumulate up to 55 gallons at or near the point of generation. We call this accumulation point, or SAP. They can accumulate it there for an indefinite period of time. In good condition, they have to be lined if it's appropriate for the type of waste. The containers have to be closed when they're not in use. I want that things like parts cleaning capabilities, little Sabilo brushes in them that are in almost every automotive shop, garage, parts, degreasing parts. These are the kind of containers we're talking about. If they are closed. Yeah. Keeping the potential fire and vapor and volatilization down. That's where if we kept that volatilization down, we can keep ozone formation minimized. We talked about this as the cradle-to-grave document. Generators have to prepare a uniform hazardous waste manifest before they ship off from their facility. It's a document of accountability for the men, for transporters, and for the receiving facilities with hazardous waste anytime they're on public roads. If you're going from one step of your facility to another, you have to have a manifest for it. And just assume that if you have contiguous pieces of property, you can do that. Flint Hill will take a drum from one side of their plant on one to the other side of the road and not manifest for that little transport. This manifests, identifies the generators, transporters, and TSDF. It verifies that the wastes are packaged and marked and labeled appropriately. The manifest lists the proper shipping name. Very specific way that has to be completed. It has also it provides a block that requires the generator to sign to certify that they've minimized their waste generation to the maximum extent possible. They have a waste minimization program in place. Hazardous waste manifest looks like. This one, old one, it's been around for a while. We've been in these classes now for about 10 years, I think. From years, since 2006. The generator was for Three Rivers Refinery. 5 carbon copy set. All the way through the process from the generator that's still at the top section, filled out the next section, and the facility that filled out the final section. Certification is this flag here. Signature is right below that. Off that they've minimized the extent feasible. Notice name is there, right on the waste toxic liquids, comma, flammable, comma, or comma, NS. We'll talk back in. Staging group is 6.1. The United Nations HAZMAT code is 2929. 1 is the hazard class. The packing group is packaging group 2 for sulfides and amines. That was specified. Otherwise specified. A briefs in here where it says containers 001 T means they're picking one tank truck. The quantity 60, the P is for pounds. And then 4 waste codes in that block right there. Those are that are designating that this is a characteristic hazardous waste. We'll just in a little bit as well. If I pulled this, who the signatory was, you'd have to answer Kathy Garcia, and signing for the TS, it's Mary S. That's the way that must be pronounced. Record keeping. Generators have to keep a copy of the manifest for 3 years after they've shipped. All kept for 3 years. Characterization have to be kept. And then manifest discrepancy reports whenever there's been a manifest or discrepancy. It's manifest discrepancy. If you 6 drums and 65 arrived at the disposal facility, somebody will be asking questions. Where did those 3 drums go? Waste condition. You're going to ship a waste out to Teak and Robstown. You have to send them a sample and station form. different things, but that's basically what it is, a waste characterization form, waste characterization sheet. When we send this off to the disposal facility looks at the sample, they waste characterization form. We can take this waste and this is how much it's going to be. Or those, we can't take this waste. Or they can say, our company can take this waste, but it has to be shipped to another facility in Kansas. In any of those ways, but you do not contract an authorization to ship to that facility unless they have looked at the characterization form. Yeah, and accepted it and given you a contract to ship. If characterizing a waste, I want you to waste have variability. If you sent off to TICO for analysis and acceptance, is a 5 time. And then it might be 3 the next time, correct? Variability, because if they say it's 5 and you get 5 and they say they accept 5 and it shows up at 4, they may have a right to reject that load. If you screen and you sample and the first ship it's more brown than green, that shipment. So shipping a hazardous waste to a facility, you want to make absolutely certain that characterizing it in a way that they can accept it when the actual load gets in there. Color, you can say brown to green, and they can say it's okay, or they can say, oh, okay, we can only accept if it's green. But that contract between the generator and the disposal facility as to what the disposal facility will accept.
We are military.
Yeah. Well, waste has variability, and the receiving sites know that. But don't now on this, then what happens is you characterize it, they're looking at one day, and by the time you ship it, it's something else. You know, it's still maybe the same waste material. Maybe it's the pigments it used in a painting a car. The difference of what color it is.
And if you have dye fuel, things that come up, you know.
They might be orange, they might be lime green, or they might be purple, right? So have to let the living facility know that there's some variability, and there's a waste that they might be mixed together. You know, this is label. This is what you would expect to see. Notice we may be able to put waste in here. We know where the generator is. We're the generator. Number. We may not know, well, it was number as well, although we may add other things to that same drum or container as we're going along. The first date that you put in there is when you need to put a label on that, put the date on it. Document number. You may not know that until the day it ships out. And this here is for the proper shipping name. And that that I showed you earlier on the manifest is the order it needs to be put into this 3-line. Label, oh, it's only about, well, it's by 6 or 8 by 8. About, you can weigh and know the hazardous waste label. On the board, it's probably, what, 6 by 6 foot? Really see in this case, but even small would be easy to see. What are regulated materials? A hazardous waste must be a solid waste. Sounds pretty simple. No, it doesn't mean it's solid. It just means a solid waste by definition. This is what we're saying the physicists and the politicians didn't quite get the same today. It's defined as any waste that has been discarded or abandoned. Solids, woods, semi-solids, or contain gases. Can be a hazardous waste. And it's, then by definition, it's a solid waste. But it may still consider a solid waste. Solid waste is out there. Anything that's waste basically is a solid waste, no matter what business it's in. Basically, it poses substantial threat to human health or the environment, properly handled, stored, disposed, transported, or significantly contribute to an increase in mortality or health issues, which includes patogenic, mutagenic, and all those genic issues that might affect people or fetus or anybody else. Hazardous waste. There are some RCRA exclusions for the definition of hazardous waste. Number one, flush your toilet in a publicly operated treatment works. It's and regulated as RCRA. Have your golf course or your phone and runs off into a ditch. It is not considered waste. The creek, the river, if it's returned, it's not considered hazardous waste. You've been fertilizing the heck and putting pesticides on that field. If it's an return, it's not considered hazardous waste. If you have a clean water permit under the Natural Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, permitted industrial point source discharge, or MPDS, is excluded from RCRA. It's not from environmental regulations. There are regulations apply for that. Heavy regulations apply under the Clean Water Act for that. Byproduct materials are regulated under the Atomic Energy Act. Spent fuels and things like that are not part of RCRA. Under reused, it's not under RCRA. Recycled considered solid waste if they're used to make an industrial product. That's the example of the plastic that I mentioned earlier. You might have something like antifreeze. If you're a antifreeze, that's not going to be related as waste. It's for commercial products. That's not. It qualifies for the recycling exemption. If the original process from which they're generated without being reclaimed, then back into the slop tank or the mixed tank or the respin or whatever that goes back into the processes, that too qualifies for the recycling exemption from RCRA. A hazardous waste if it's a mixture containing a listed hazardous waste. Anything that's mixed with a listed hazardous waste soy, cotton, trash, wash, rinse waters, decon, fluid. With a listed hazardous waste, the entire mixture becomes hazardous. One or more characteristics of hazardous waste. Okay. I'll tell you in a minute what characteristics of hazardous waste are, but I'll tell you again right now. Corrosive, reactive, ignitable, or toxic. And it's waste if it's not excluded by regulation. Some ones that really apply to those of you interested in this room. Definition is excluding things like some nuclear waste or product materials as defined by the Atomic Energy Agency. And waste from processing ores and minerals. some of Ed Hills over at Sherwin Alumina might otherwise qualified for being hazardous waste. It's from processing ores and minerals. Site. Around Deer, Texas, and you see some mountains every bit as big as those that are gypsum. Production of a number of different process for alkali processes that line materials, the processing of ores and minerals. Utilities, I mentioned earlier, utilities. From a coal-fired power utility waste, diluted from RCRA. You even have things like mercury in them. Oiling muds and brines used to recycle. Those are some major exclusions. Yes, sir.
See, it kind of contradicts itself by saying that if you have hazardous waste in any product, that product becomes a hazardous waste. But then you have losings for certain processes that have material in them, so it's not a hazardous waste.
I think you've got it. Got it. There are that I expect you to know the definitions of. One of them is the extra rule, and the other one's the derived from rule. We'll talk about it in a minute. A waste, I'm going to keep in this with a few slides here. Hazardous, if it's characteristic for hazardous waste, meaning it meets specific hazardous waste characteristics, or it's said because EPA says it's on the list. It's pretty much simple. Now, there are separate lists that you need to be aware of, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Toxic waste. I read the acronym CRIT. I don't know how I came up with that one, but years ago I came up with that. Ignitable and toxic. A waste that meets any one of those characteristics. Remember a bunch of numbers on there, D001, that means that was an ignitable waste. We see 003, that means it was a reactive waste. We 024 or something like that, I don't remember what the number was. But toxic waste, meaning it failed TCLP for toxicity. Corrosion 002, you should probably know you have to know those four characteristics of hazardous waste. Corrosive, ignitable, and toxic. This is last I will expect you to remember ignitable. Not flammable, not flammable, not flammable. The in RCRA is ignitable. We know those. Whether it's on the test or not, to be honest with you, I know that there is a question on the HAZWOPER test that's along that line that says if I give a number, D3 or FO26 or K27, what did it prevent? And the answer to that would be hazardous waste identification numbers. Yeah, I know, that's on the HAZWOPER test, not on the, I don't remember whether it's on this test or not. About 6 times a year, I see this test about twice a year. All right, toxic hazardous waste. Toxic, we were talking about a minute ago. Objective toxic characteristic leaching procedure. Get that pretty much correct. I have been rather liberal on you've got to know that term TCLP. It's toxic characteristic leachability procedure instead of leaching procedure. I would probably accept that. I have that as leachability rather than leaching, but the slides there. Certain heavy metals, pesticides, and organics. What is leachate? Leachate is that material, that liquid set at the bottom of a landfill after rain has fallen on a hazardous waste landfill and leached through that waste and picked up materials on the way. The test is done in the laboratory using an acetic acid in a liter jar that's tumbled for a day, and then you extract from that and determine how much of the contaminants are in the leachate. That's the process right there. You do not need to memorize that, but this is for the TCLP test. As a chemistry major, I would recommend studying, learning a little bit. Hazardous waste is a hazardous waste characteristic, including wastes that are normally able, easy to contend with, reactively with water, makes sense. From toxic gases when mixed with water, of detonation or explosion, those are reactive wastes. Some considered a reactive waste. Hazardous waste. So our hazardous wastes that have a pH of less than 2 or greater than 12.5. Has a pH a shade above 2. But that's probably the thing, because then if you spill Coke on the ground, you don't necessarily have to consider it a hazardous waste spill. So that flammable materials are at 100 degrees Fahrenheit, combustible materials are at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. But to make things interesting in the hazardous waste definitions, ignitable is a flash point of 140. Over 40. This is the part that we pay attention to as far as waste is concerned. It also includes things that will spontaneously ignite, like pyrophoric materials like rainy nickel, powdered nickel. Often, if you leave that sitting out in the air or spray it with water, it will ignite. Spray it, it will ignite. Absorb the water out of the air or ignite. What's? Yes. Oxidizers that are defined as oxidizers by the Department of Transportation are also considered ignitable. Roger, an example as well. Wastes are only remain hazardous as long as they still exhibit those hazardous waste characteristics. If you mix with other materials, they're considered hazardous if they still exhibit that characteristic after they're being mixed. Waste. These include the following. Again, to these, there's 3 numbers following it, okay? Waste from non-specific sources. And back to your question about whether or not this is on the test, you'll have to remember each of these things. Wake them up. Yeah, okay. Okay, so hazardous waste from specific sources. The source. Galvanizing would be a specific source. Certain industries would have specific sources. Oil from a preserving operation is a specific source. Just chemicals and products, things that have reached their shelf life, things that are just old and you're throwing them away. A commercial chemical or product that you're throwing out that is acute hazardous is going to be a P waste, or toxic and hazardous is going to be a U waste. I think slide is a decision tree. No, not this one. This you not need to memorize. For those of you that are online, this is slide number 44. Don't need to memorize that. That's not going to be all that important throughout your career, as long as you remember the other things we've been talking about tonight. A definition of hazardous waste, regardless of the concentration, regardless of what it's mixed with, no matter how it shapes up, the listed waste is a listed waste, and it stays that always. If EPA specifically delists the waste, that might get you off the hook. Listed if a mixture is created waste, the entire batch is considered hazardous waste. You mix the hazardous waste and the solid waste together, non-hazardous solid waste together. If it still has that characteristic, then it's still hazardous. If it doesn't characteristic, it makes. This thing in the hazardous waste regulations, they call it the residual rule. A lot of companies a lot of money. If there's residue in the bottom of a container, 2.5 millimeters in the bottom of a container, 55, for example, or in a container that's 110 gallons, or a container that's over 110 gallons, then that container is considered to be empty by RCRA definition. A bottom of 55-gallon drum, that could be a gallon of material, huh? Stuff. Now, dried paint, that's not, maybe. I helped a fellow a few years ago that had a hazardous waste issue. In South San Antonio had been found guilty of dumping into residue and literal thousands of gallon drums in bins and water barrels and barbecue pits. Dumped on the ground. EQ looking for the guy. He was split down and reportedly was on a sailboat somewhere in the Caribbean. So, EPA do, and we'll talk about this more in CERCLA. TCQ, they went and looked for who had sent waste to this facility. Drums to this facility had live for the site. I had been identified as somebody that had potentially sent drums to that facility. Proof that he not actually sent drums to that facility, he had only bought drums from that facility. We were off of the list of people they were coming after. But actually, every automobile dealership, every car rental agency in the city of Antonio, most paint and body shops pay for cleaning up that site. This guy for about 18 years and had dues on the ground for all that time. So, being a company that says, okay, that's considered an empty container. You not a container, but you triple rinse it. And liability if you give it to somebody else. No, not applied to acutely hazardous waste, by the way. Thing is the process when you get a waste that was listed and making it so it's not listed anymore. It's a difficult process. It usually takes well more than a year. some major corporations that have had some of their waste removed, but it's difficult. Have to have plenty of evidence with TCLP tests and the like to substantiate the claim that it meet a criteria for hazardous waste and should be delisted. The of hazardous waste that I was talking about. The first of waste is down here at the roots of this tree. You have hazardous subtitle D waste and Title C waste. Going on, you've got the listed and characteristic. You're pretty much going to get the idea of questions that might be on the quizz's desk. FP listed waste are listed. This waste of hazardous waste are super reactive, ignitable, and toxic. Ignitable means got a flash point of less than 140. Corrosive has got a pH of less than 2 or greater than 12.5. And like a really good break point to me tonight. We're on slide number 50, talking about transportation of hazardous waste. I think we're tonight at this stage. If any have any, I'll be glad to entertain them right now. Okay, maybe I'll just sing. No, I can't sing either. All right. Lots of questions. Anybody that's got us about any of their reports or yes, ma'am.
Anything regulating the, actually done with it, and how that's regulated. Government relations meeting. I ordered a book today,
Okay.
so I said, get my background on. I have written something on it.
On each industry, there's going to be people that pick aquaculture aren't going to find a hole in hazardous waste and record either until they start looking at, say, what you do with the side containers. I know.
But I ordered a book and it just gave a lot of information that I read.
I would recommend looking at API for guidance on some of the other federal regulations that might apply.
I did. I deal with a little bit. But they're not really in Fido or Fido that much.
One of the things is they probably don't want to stick their head up too high.
Yeah, it's more full than exposed.
Keep at it. You'll get plenty of material.
Yeah.
But it's going to take some on some of y'all's part to get kind of things in order. Do anything special here? Just close.